information in the chat. So we're gonna do a quick welcome. That's what I'm doing now. Yay. We have Don Miller, and I'm sorry, Darren, if I mess up your last name. I want to say Paschke.
Yep.
Yay! All right, we got Don and Darren from Foundational Community Supports over at the Healthcare Authority, and they are going to present to us today on supported employment, correct?
Correct.
All right. So we're going to let you share screen, and we'll just go ahead and start it. If you guys have questions that come up during their presentations, either go ahead and type them in the chat or write them down on your paper and save them to the end. But we'll try and keep an eye on that and then make sure we get to them hopefully at the end. So for now, let's pass it on over to Don and Darren.
Well, thanks, everybody. Thanks for inviting us out today to meet with you and so many folks today. Looks like a great, diverse audience today. My name's Darren Paschke. I can't even say my own last name. You did a better job for me to call. Supportive Employment Program Manager with Foundational Community Supports with DBHR HCA. I have over 35 years of supportive employment experience. So I've been through different models and then adapting to the evidence-based practice model of individual placement and support back in 2008. So definitely Don and I have a lot of lived experience providing employment services, developing programs, managing staff and managing programs. And now we're at that capacity where we're able to do a lot of engagement in the community, support other folks adapting to this, what I feel is a real critical part of any treatment model for working with people in the community. And with that, I'll hand it over to you, Dawn, for introduction.
All righty, sounds good. So one of the presentations that Darren and I did recently, he tried to pass us off as having a combined total of 100 years experience, but it really is, well, it's about 70 because I've got about 35 years as well. My name is Dawn Miller. I am also with the Healthcare Authority, Division of Behavioral Health and Recovery, Supported Employment Program Manager for the east side of the state. So Darren and I split the state in regards to being able to work with agencies and do training and conferences and a variety of things along that line. Nicole, you mentioned that you like the enthusiasm. I think one of the things you'll see with Darren and I and all of our colleagues, everyone at HCA, I'm always boggled about the depth of passion that we all have for what we do. And you're definitely going to hear the depth of passion that we have for supported employment and the importance in regards to a person's behavioral health. Sometimes that passion means that we get talking and answering questions so well that we don't get through our slides. So if that's the case, we'll apologize in advance and the slides will be available to you. So with that, back to Darren.
We really enjoy that engagement. And if things come up, we're more than willing to stop and answer the questions. Because I think if somebody's already thinking of something, it's great to, respond as that comes up. So with that, we'll get started. So here's a couple of learning objectives today. As we said, this is group dynamics, so we really like that engagement with everybody. But we really want to emphasize how important it is for employment in anybody's behavioral health recovery, SUD recovery, any kind of recovery process. Employment is a key pillar to that. We really want to demonstrate how employment is part of social determinants of health, and really look at the evidence-based practices of IPS and how critical they are to building a foundation. Not all the principles, but definitely you can go through phases and really focus on some of these key elements and the anchors of the principle to really engage and embed in program development. Plus, it's a good awareness for you to learn about what supportive employment is, so you can recognize different strengths in different programs to really maximize the support for individuals in your community. And we really want to show how important competitive employment is for people, everybody. And with that, I'll hand it over to Dawn.
This slide is intended to get you thinking. SSI, Supplemental Security Income, the new rate is $943 per month. People on SSI truly do, in exchange for a little bit of their freedom, give up a lot of things to get that $943. Is that something that you would want to have happen in your life? I know it isn't something I'd want to have happen in my life for a lot of reasons. And so this is intended really to kind of start getting you thinking about what the lives really look like of folks that are on SSI or SSDI for that matter. Most of the time, SSDI gives folks a little bit more money, but for that, sitting at home, looking at four walls, that kind of thing, I'm not sure that I think the exchange um, is a good one overall, except for folks that absolutely can do nothing else. And you're going to hear from Darren and I. I think I can count on two hands the number of people over the 35 years that I would say could not work. With a good job match, with good support, I truly have seen just about anybody be able to work. Next slide, please, Darren.
So here's some of the elements of the social determinants of health that we talked about. And we really want to focus on, you know, some of the economic and education as well, and part of the culture. Definitely, that's part of my culture is being employed and being productive and being my member of society. And I think that it's a very narrow view, but I think it's still very prevalent today. And it's something that drives me to be able to do the position I'm in today and engage with people. And I think it's something that's driving many people, but it can also have some of those negative connotations, and maybe people need a little bit more support and guidance and coaching to be able to address some of those barriers. Definitely, you know, CMS is changing the wording a little bit to HRSN. So there's a little bit more progression. But I think all those kind of pillars, how we look at these adverse social conditions and how they can contribute, you know, to poor health or poor outcomes, poor engagement, isolation, anxiety, you know, reliance on maybe medications for some stability or different social supports. So, plus the justice system, and, you know, recovery programs. So definitely there's a lot of opportunities for all these chords to come together to really support somebody. But sometimes we need to step back and make sure we're aware of all those different facets of supports and intentional services that we can provide someone so that they can move forward. Sometimes that can be pretty quick. Sometimes that could take a long time and a process and additional supports to do that. Did you have anything to add to that, Don?
I think you covered it well. Thank you.
Back to you.
All right. So we put in this slide because we really wanted to draw the parallel between housing first and employment first principles. You can see they're essentially the same. In the state of Washington, foundational community supports really is about providing both assistance to find and maintain housing and assistance to find and maintain employment. They're a match made in heaven. I think that very often when we think about housing, and we know that there are housing subsidies to help people stay housed over a period of time, we may not think about employment as kind of the ultimate way for a person to stay housed. Having that income and certainly increases the number of options that people may have and helps with kind of the long-term ability to be housed, maybe even to buy a house, you know, those kinds of things, the kinds of things that we all hope to have. And we hope that the people we serve have them at some point in time as well. Anything from you on that one, Darren?
Well, one of the things I'm thinking is that some of the things that we talk about is, you know, that first engagement with folks and having this kind of as a pillar of your program philosophy. And I've worked with people who say they want to go to work, and in the past, maybe there's these prolonged processes that might interfere or get in the way with that employment engagement. Sometimes it's, oh, people have to come in so many times to see a person, or somebody has to be sober or clean. But that doesn't really honor that individual person-centered philosophy. And sometimes we need to really look and maybe look at how we engage folks so that we can kind of get some of the information and really respect the choice in that process, and how the supports we can provide to make them successful in the return to work, or even, you know, maintaining stable housing. So again, social determinants of health, it's just like we think about employment, we see employment, you know, I go to meetings once a month and I hear about some of the robust numbers for employment across the country right now, and particularly with folks with a disability, it's over 36% right now. So definitely over the pandemic, we've seen this increase of people with disabilities engage in the workforce. So it's pretty exciting to kind of see that our social goals and the health of our nation is really focused on getting people engaged to do some of that. And plus, there's a lot of research that really backs up how important employment is. Or we also look at supportive education, because sometimes people have goals maybe to complete a certificate or get a new certificate or complete their higher education goals of a bachelor's or a master's degree, and how that can fit into those long-term goals of employment. So I always kind of think about where I would be, without employment. I wouldn't be able to afford my rent. I wouldn't be able to engage in the community with my social group of friends. I wouldn't be able to take my dog to doggy daycare. So I know there's a lot of critical elements that can really come together to really support people on the mission. So just reinforcing how important, and I think it's a part of our culture and many cultures across the globe, at how important it is. And with that, the individual placement and support model is actually worldwide right now. They just added a few more states, but they're out actually in many countries as well, kind of bringing this force together to really help people become employed, and changing how we fund things, that governments are funding programs that, collect data and monitor data and use this kind of as a great leverage to even get more funding. At least that's what I used to do in my employment program. And I think, Don, you probably use the same thing as well, collecting some data to access and leverage more funding to expand programming opportunities.
Sure.
Over to you, Don.
All righty. So the information on this slide is not surprising, but it's worth mentioning again. And you can see, and I'm going to back up for just a second. About 70% of the people in FCS services have a diagnosable mental health condition, whether that's the primary reason they're receiving services or not. And so mental illness is prevalent amongst the folks that we serve. Certainly co-occurring disorders are prevalent as well. But if you consider the fact that the lower socioeconomic status of an individual is higher, or is of an individual is higher. I'm not going to read them anymore. You can read them. The coffee has not yet kicked in, so. But none of these things come as a big surprise, but like I say, they really are worth mentioning again. We're not going to eradicate mental illness. And we talk about eradicating poverty, and one of the first steps towards doing that is helping people become employed. So that's another reason why it's so very important. Darren, other information from you? Don't read.
Yeah, I'm reading. I got busted. Well, just, I was thinking that, number 5, because definitely when I was in behavioral health and did a lot of crisis intervention, I would see a lot of people discharge from institutionalized facilities, for short-term or long-term psychiatric hospitalization. Sometimes they would get a bus ticket. Sometimes, they'd have a discharge plan, but in reality, they didn't have those different supports. And it's really exciting to see, working with the HCA and all the different various programs that we're looking at, to really minimize some of the impacts, so that there's those bridge to the community, so communities can have more support. Definitely, I still know, definitely housing and having housing for folks, with behavioral health issues and COD issues is a critical need in the communities, and will continue to grow. But definitely, really focusing on some of those bridge activities to really change the outlook for when people are discharged and get those support. And the HCA, I think we just are adding a new position to kind of really look at folks in those institutions and start that education about foundational community supports services in the facility before folks are discharged, so that they can know about some of the opportunities, which hopefully will lead to more stability in the community.
Absolutely. And I know we've also focused on youth. There are too few youth receiving these kinds of services. We can change the trajectory of individuals if we, at whatever point we catch them. But the younger, the better in regards to being able to be employed and successfully employed, and maybe change some attitudes about employment. I know I've worked with people over the years. I've had a caseload more of my life than not. And very often folks that I worked with were in multi-generational poverty where, if parents worked, the potential is that it was a survivor kind of job that they didn't really like. And that's what the kids saw too. And, so trying to impact the work can be something you enjoy. You can have your dream job. I joke about the fact that I'm 67 years old and I finally have my dream job. Yeah, I'm a late bloomer, what can I tell you? But it's so important to help people to understand that concept. Work can be fun. Work can be fulfilling and enriching. Next slide, please, Darren.
So here's a little bit of data, because definitely we talk to providers collecting data, and we do some of our own sharing data. And definitely this is from 2011, but I think it's really significant in terms of some of those rates of employment, with, excuse me, with disabilities and without. And definitely we're seeing that, increase within the data from Department of Labor, and seeing more people with disabilities, that are self-reporting with those jobs having a higher, percentage of employment. And it also kind of shows maybe how some of the wording that we see in some of the forms and how information is collected. Being in a program, one of the things about client-centered goals is how is some of the forms set up when we first come into an organization or agency. At the agency I used to work with before we made some changes is like, are you employed? Yes or no? And then they move on to find out what are the other functional limitations, or maybe behavioral limitations, or if you've been in jail, and all those type of valid questions. But what would it be like if we got people thinking about the future? Would you like to get a job now, or would you like to be paid to do something in the future, in the next 30, 60, or 90 days? How some of those changes on some of the forms that we have people could be that trajectory to get people thinking that there's something other than what we're doing now, and maybe kind of changing that flow from people just focusing on in-office work versus working with an employment specialist to start doing things back into the community. That was always my focus in working with the people, job seekers in the behavioral health services. Is like, it's that engagement in the community and working with people. That's kind of where they want to be. They didn't want to have that stigma of coming into behavioral health twice a week or coming in for groups daily during the week, but they really wanted to be back in the community, trying to get some of their life components back to what they were prior to the crisis or the trauma that they experienced. So definitely, there's definitely a lot more work, to do, but definitely, for folks who aren't working, what can we do to kind of really change that engagement piece early on in the process of doing assessments, and get them thinking down the road to do something different than what they're doing now. Back over to you, Don.
All right. So people have very often perceived and real barriers related to becoming employed. To some degree, those perceived barriers are harder to work with than are the actual barriers. If you think about somebody that's had a job that went very poorly, that at the end of it, they felt like a failure, that they had employers that didn't treat them very well, and that kind of thing, that can be a hard thing to get over. My son actually starts a new job today and has disabilities. And the last job that he was at, he told him, I can't do money. I'm not good with math. I can't do that kind of thing. And it was a fast food restaurant where they put him in the window, taking money and taking orders and that kind of thing. He is incredibly nervous. And if I seem nervous today, it's probably more for him and his new job than anything. But that left such a bad impression. It took a very long time for him to get motivated to look for work again. Those perceived barriers can be horrible. They truly can for a person. And I think that's a lot of what the providers do when they're working with people is help to work on the self-esteem, help people to understand that they've got strengths and abilities and that can be used to find a job and you know, in such a way as to find a job that is their dream job. So I think those barriers are huge. The actual barriers are maybe a little easier to work with because there are things like I don't have a driver's license yet, or I need interview clothing, or my resume is spotty, and how do I write the resume to make a difference? Or I have justice involvement, and does that mean that I have to change my career goals? Or those things I think in a lot of cases are easier to work with than the perceptual barriers that exist. Next slide, please, Darren.
Well, I just kind of wanted me to comment on the perceptual barriers. I was just in a training and they talked about youth, because with foundational community supports on supportive housing and supportive employment, we can start engaging folks at age 16. And that's a great time to really provide some of those in-person individualized supports to folks at that young age to really kind of guide them into employment and supportive education. But the study was talking about they took some students and they were focusing on getting them paid employment. And then they had another group of students where they were just doing volunteer work. And those folks who were in the pool of paid employment had higher rates of employment afterwards because they're already setting that stage to engage in competitive employment. And with those people in that line of services became more successful. So it was thinking about that because definitely I've come for programs where you can do a lot of skill building and a lot of assessments. And I've seen some of these things prolonged to 270 days for volunteer work. And even that kind of perception and limitation can be really detrimental to those long-term effects of people getting out of that volunteer trough, so to speak, and get them into, thinking about paid employment. So we've talked about some of the positives. We're all aware there's also some of the negative parts of unemployment and even greater negative impact of long-term unemployment. Definitely, some of the things that, we do see is, more isolation, some depression, demoralization. It can be really hard to do that. And we saw a lot of folks go through this during the COVID pandemic and on how hard that was to face those barriers and then get back out, and even saw more self-harm type things, of more reliance on substance abuse, and more negative health issues. Definitely not having any income, it would be a huge impact to my budget and my earnings for short-term and long-term. And I've always believed in structure. I've worked with a lot of people who had unstructured time at home. And I always thought, well, if they came into our agency and organized, we could get them engaged in some kind of things and then take some of those activities out into the community to help, do that bridge to employment or do that bridge to supportive education. So I'm quite passionate about how to break up that time and take those non-productive hours, maybe they're sitting at home and isolating, to, engagement and some socialization. And sometimes I think we saw this during the COVID pandemic, that some people who lost their jobs never were able to kind of get back to work and might have to apply, for Social Security just to maintain a minimal level of income for folks.
I will say one of the things that strikes me about this, and part of the reason why employment is a social determinant of health, is that there are various studies that show that people who are chronically unemployed die earlier than those of us who typically are employed. My colleague and mentor, Joe Maroney, found a study that said up to 25 years. That's mind-boggling. That's the most extreme. I've seen a lot less than that. But 5, 10, 15 years, any early loss of life because of a factor that we can help to change is not okay. And truly, if you think about employment and what it does for us, all the things that it does for us, including having the money to buy good food and to maybe make sure that we have transportation to get to medical appointments, and just a variety of things like that. If you put all the pieces together, it makes sense that people who are chronically unemployed die earlier than those of us that are typically employed. Um, just one of those kinds of things that causes that passion to be, and we help people, we need to help people find jobs. We do. Next slide, please, Darren. And here are some of the positives. And this list is certainly not all encompassing. I just think about, it's interesting to me in individual placement and support. It's a very systematized process and the principles and things. And one of the things that the individual placement and support folks have done is put some videos together to show kind of how things might look when you're having team meetings or when you're working with an individual or things along that line, particularly as related to fidelity reviews. In one of the videos about a team meeting, the fidelity reviewers asked the various different team members, when do you talk to a person about employment? And the gentleman that played the case manager in the video said, if they say they're bored, if they say they're lacking friends, if they're saying they have too much time on their hands. I mean, the list is really long as far as, I'm not bored at work. I wish I was on occasion. Things are far busier than I can keep up with sometimes. And certainly, I consider Darren amongst my friends, good friends, and a support. Can't imagine being without him, and part of that came because of the job that I've got. And I suspect you all have that kind of thing as well. Somebody with whom you click well with at work that you can't imagine their life without. So all of those kinds of things are benefits of work, and I'm sure there's others you can think of as well. Darren?
I think that's a good point, Don. We don't always talk about those natural supports and those other benefits that probably aren't in a job description that might come with a culture of an organization. I worked with one gentleman who had done sports in college, but he had impacted negatively by schizophrenia. So he definitely needed a lot more support. But after he worked at the job site and people were able to engage with him, and they found out he had a baseball player, they wanted him on the baseball team. So there's sometimes those exciting things that happen, secondary, that I would never have thought of that might happen. But that's kind of when you get that real ability of integration, in a work site where they see value in people, and then, they invite him to be part of, these offsite things for the company. So it can be really exciting, some of this stuff that goes on. And definitely, I think I've also seen more employers over time become more educated about disabilities and more aware. Definitely before I came into the job at the healthcare authority, going out and doing job development, I still saw some of that engagement where employers would self-disclose. You're building that relationship with people in the community, and they would disclose that they had a friend or family member or somebody in the current household that had a disability, and share how hard things are. And then, engage a little bit more about thinking outside the box. Well, maybe somebody that could be part of their team, at a business or at a restaurant or whatever that might be. So definitely, it's always exciting to kind of see those natural supports blossom. I just kind of wanted to check to see if there's any kind of questions or anything that might have come up in the chat through some of the things that we've covered so far.
I don't think I saw any questions in the chat, but I absolutely love what I'm hearing. It's, talk about moving upstream and talking with folks, young people about, the positive things that come with employment, no matter what you're doing, no matter what your ability, all these positive things that come with it, changing the outlook. We talk about changing stigma on a number of, social determinants of health, different things in our world, but such positive impacts that come with employment in your everyday value and what you do. So I appreciate you touching on that. We should bring that up a lot sooner in life.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Nicole. There's definitely been some times where we've been successful in the field getting people jobs, and it goes back to the case manager, and the case manager or the therapist might share that at a team meeting and just like, what? Darren got a job? There's no way. He had so many barriers.
And that's so exciting to hear, right? It's
yeah.
it's a difficult thing, but absolutely wonderful. to obtain that kind of work. And it's such an inspiration when, no matter what you do, you have the opportunity to meet other people either in an organization or outside of it. I mean, for working in a restaurant, you have an opportunity to meet so many people from so many walks of life. Different organizations might inspire your next step of work or what you want to do. All of a sudden, I might want to, be a welder because I met somebody who, in passing that all of a sudden inspired a different line of work for me. So just having that consistent social interaction, inspiring and networking is super important.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that.
I don't give me a welding. I don't want to be a welder though, because I'll probably.
I have a welding story that I'm going to tell later, and that it's kind of interesting too.
I'll take a pause though. If anyone else has a question, I see Kyle had wrote something in the chat. Is there any data to be shared linking unemployment with suicide? Yeah, I thought that was quite an interesting data point that you did bring up on life expectancy. But yes, thank you, Kyle. Dawn, do you know any
So I don't.
data sets?
I think that's a great one to bring up to the IPS folks, because being IPS is an evidence-based practice. It's research-based, and they continue to do research on the impact of employment on various different groups. I don't think they've done anything on this one, and it's brilliant. I truly think Darren and I will send them an email and say this came up in a training, and is this something that you have in the works that you might do a study on? They've done studies on the impact of employment on folks with substance use disorders, with mental health disorders, with spinal cord injuries. They did a study with folks that were veterans that had spinal cord injuries that impacted their ability to work, and kind of the impact then of work once they were able to find those jobs. So they've done a variety of different studies. This one would be, like I say, I think brilliant. So we're going to bring it up.
It would, and that's a nice thing about having working with the IPS Learning Center, is that they are looking at folks with substance use disorder issues, and look a little bit with folks with forensic issues. So there's some dynamic changes that go on, and we'll have to kind of look at that, because there might be some stuff that we have. Because I was thinking, I wonder if Joe Maroney has done any kind of might have some access to some of that as well.
Right. Yeah.
That. So really good question.
Yeah. And here's my note to remind me to talk to the IPS folks about it. You're on record now, Kyle. So next slide, please, Darren.
So we're going to jump into some of the core principles of individual placement and support evidence-based practice that I've been using since 2008. This is just some. Definitely there's 25 different principles with multiple anchors for each one. But we really want to kind of focus on some of the overviews and some of the critical elements for some of the principles, as maybe you're thinking about developing a program, or maybe just so you have a bit of a roadmap as you work with other providers to see where they're at in the process of implementing some of these best practices. Because overall, there's a lot of data that shows for organizations, programs implementing these best practices of IPS, they have higher employment rates. And it was very interesting to see that these rates of 40% employment maintained those levels even over the pandemic. So definitely, and this is just not within the United States. They take data, from Italy, from Japan, from Norway, I think maybe Spain now too, to kind of get some of these numbers. So it's really interesting. And I'm going to hand it over, the first part, over to Dawn to do the first set, and then I'll follow up with the second half.
And I do want to say that individual placement and support, the evidence-based practice, was originally developed to work with people with serious mental illness. Whereas Darren mentioned the 40, I think it's 42 at this point in time, % success rate in helping people become employed and maintain employment. The state of Washington and across the nation, when we first started kind of working with this program and process, the average employment rate of people with serious mental illness was somewhere between 14 and 21%. So 40 may not sound like a bunch, but you compare it to where it came from, it's a bunch. So I think that's important to know. I like IPS. Darren mentioned, earlier that he's done kind of all kinds of iterations of supported employment and the way that it works. IPS makes sense to me because it is very common sense. A lot of the items, and I'll kind of mention those as I go, just relate back to the kinds of things that you do in everyday kind of circumstances anyway. Competitive employment is the goal. By that, they mean paying at least minimum wage in a setting where other people with disabilities, without disabilities, I should say, are also working. So it's not volunteering. It's not a sheltered workshop. It's a job that others might have. Now, one of the things that IPS doesn't recognize as much, but WellPoint and the FCS program recognizes that some of the people we work with have such serious challenges that they can't just do all the aspects of a job description. They can't. It's not possible. And so sometimes we do job carving or customized employment where we work with an employer that we get to know well to carve out a piece of a job that it matches a person's strengths so that it's a win-win for both the employer and the individual. The individual gets to do what they're good at. The employer gets to have that function filled when maybe it hasn't been before. An example of that being a colleague of mine ended up helping someone get a job at Nike, matching the shoes in a big box of mismatched shoes. It was something that the other employees were expected to do when they had some downtime, but everybody managed not to have downtime because who wants to sit at a box of matched shoes? Well, this gentleman did. And it was perfect for him, perfect for Nike. And that's a kind of brief example of what a customized employment might look like. IPS employment is integrated with treatment. Because it was written originally or developed originally for people with serious mental illness and behavioral health agencies, the intent was that the employment program would be an integral part, and that if they received referrals from therapists or case managers or the med team or whoever it might be in that behavioral health agency, that they also collaborated with those other teams to stay on the same page in regards to what's going on with the person. And, you know, I mentioned those IPS videos earlier and kind of examples of what a team meeting could look like. There's one treatment team meeting example where the med prescriber is there and they're talking about the person and some challenges that they're having at work that relate back to med side effects. And that med prescriber then said, okay, I can change the time dosage, something, I don't remember what it was, in order to address that issue. So it really is about integrating with anyone who is a paid provider that's working with a person. A lot of the FCS providers that we work with at this point in time are not behavioral health agencies. They're the Goodwills and the community action programs and you know, kind of individual programs and things like that. So they don't have access to that treatment team. We encourage them though. Let's say somebody is receiving services through the DDA. Then that DDA case resource manager should be a piece of the conversation. So the intent is really building that support team around the person so that anyone working with them is a piece of things. An example of why this can be a problem if it doesn't happen. Let's say somebody is recently returned to the community from incarceration. Perhaps their plan to return to the community includes you can't work within X number of feet of a grade school or something along that line. And you're not working with the DOC staff that's working with the Department of Corrections, staff that's working with the person, and you place them in a job that's within that setting. They've just I lost the word, broken their parole potentially. Another example of one that I ran into over time was individuals on TANF, temporary assistance for needy families or work first. Those individuals typically have what's called an individual responsibility plan, where the expectation, if they're going to continue to receive their cash grant, is that they comply with that individual responsibility plan. Very often, well, typically it either addresses going to work or going to school. And I know I worked with a person on my caseload who wanted to go to school, but in fact, her IRP said go to work. She said, I'll lose my grant if I do this. So we worked with the DSHS worker in order to get it included in the individual responsibility plan. And then she was in good shape. Without having done that, she might have lost her cash grant. Zero exclusion is my favorite. What it says is if a person says they're ready to work, they're ready to work. Symptoms of mental illness don't make it, don't cause the person to be discounted. Symptoms of substance use disorder, just generally anything that might be happening in the person's life. And I would ask, and this is, I not intending to be offensive, although sometimes I do that on occasion without intending. Are you ready to work on any given day? Are all your ducks in a row on any given day? I know mine are not. I actually have anxiety disorder, and most days it's pretty well managed. Some days it's not. I know there are people that would have said at some point in time that I could not do this job because of the ducks are all over the place. Yeah, and I think I have a couple of squirrels woven into mine. I'm not entirely sure. And so the intent of zero exclusion is a lot of us are not truly not truly ready to work, and yet we make it happen anyway because we have that desire to do so, because it actually helps us to move things past things like anxiety disorder. A number of years ago, I was doing a presentation to 75 people, and I had a panic attack so bad that my co-presenter had to take over for me. The fact that I do presentations all the time has been an exposure therapy of sorts, and it's caused me to be more successful in this realm and actually to be more confident talking to people in general and less anxious. So work can do some great, great things for people. And we never know who's going to be successful or not. Preferences are honored. Has anybody ever been in a job they hated? And how did that work for you? I picked raspberries and strawberries and things as a youngster, and definitely that was a self-assessment to say, gee, I want to go to college. I don't want to do this kind of thing forevermore. And I think we do kind of that self-assessment and develop our preferences from that. We decide what works and what doesn't. Darren, over to you.
I just wanted to, share preferences. Sometimes we need a survival job. And when I was in college, I needed a survival job because I had tuition to pay. And I was in this call center. And it was the most horrible experience I ever had. So I said, I'm not cut out for that. And now I will know that as I work with people down the road, not knowing I'd be in social services, that I would not, promote that kind of business atmosphere because it was just horrible.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
we've all had those.
For that. So the next one is benefit planning and education. And we talk a lot here about the HCA. About benefits, because my experience is working with somebody in social services, behavioral health, and SUD services, or being discharged from jail, quite a large bandwidth and diverse population. Somebody always has some benefits. They could be Medicaid, they could be SNAP, it could be ABD. I'm not going to be able to tell you what these acronyms are. I can't remember adult. I can't remember what ABD is. Sorry, I'm getting
aging, blind, disabled.
Thank you. It does take a village with Darren sometimes.
There's a lot of acronyms in our world. There's tons.
There are. So then we have SSI, Supplemental Security Income, and then we have SSDI, Social Security Disability Income, and people will exchange those freely. It's just like, yeah, I have SSI, but what do you really have? Because there's different things, that people need to be aware of and how the benefits. Maybe they have Medicare, so people have a lot of different silos, so to speak, of benefits. And my philosophy is to educate and do no harm. One is that we really need to educate people about earned income, because whenever you have a benefit, even if you have retirement benefits or VA benefits, if there's income, these different providers they want to know, just like IRS. The IRS would like to know, that you are making income, because then we report. And then sometimes it might take a little while for the IRS to talk with all their other departments, particularly Social Security, about that. Oh, Darren now has income, but Darren is on, benefits. And that might change the level of benefit I get. Excuse me. So particularly, excuse me, with people on Social Security, SSI, Supplemental Security Income, that's a needs-based program. And whenever you're on a needs-based program and you have earned income, those needs-based programs will say, wow, you have resources. Well, you have so many resources, you really don't need our benefits. And that could really disrupt a person's life, their lifestyle, their medical coverage. Or if working with people, there's a lot of youth I used to work with, and the family was the payee, who is the designated person to be engaged with Social Security, that maybe their son or daughter or family member goes back to work and nobody reports anything and they still get their check. That's what we call in the world of benefit education is an overpayment. And Anderson Cooper did a wonderful piece about overpayments in Social Security, where they have these situations where people did go back to work, they didn't report their earnings, and then Social Security just comes back and sends you a letter. Congratulations, we want all our checks back for the last 2 years. And I've run into people, I've actually worked with people who've had these overpayments in excess of $30,000. Don and I go out in the community promoting principles of IPS, and we do fidelity reviews. And I heard one case where this gentleman was really good about getting jobs. He wouldn't report, and he would do this for years until Social Security finally said, well, we really want all this money back because you never notified us. And it ended up being tens of thousands of dollars, where he was 50 or over, and he had to create a payment plan with Social Security, pay that back probably for the rest of his life to do that. So these are extreme cases. But I think now with COVID has ended, public health emergency has ended, Social Security is going to be hiring a lot more staff, and some of these cases are going to be looked at. So we might be facing some overpayments that you have no idea exist. So it's always good to talk to people when you're meeting with them. We really encourage people to do the IPS career profile to start getting some information from folks, and it's free online, at the IPS Learning Center. But to be able to pick these pieces and put the puzzle together to kind of see, what they were, when they worked, did they work? Did they report their income? What did they do with their income? Did they file their taxes? All those type of things can be significant barriers that eventually catch up with folks. So definitely benefit education for me is like do no harm and educate to make sure we have some pieces in place so that they can maintain their benefits if they choose. I've worked with people that said, I can make more money if I leave these federal benefits. And I say, yes, you can. And then I could get healthcare from an employer, just like I tell everybody. I love that benefit, and those benefits can be, for other folks, job seekers, that we work with. But not everybody is always on board, so it does take some education and some reassurance. But to provide that reassurance, we really encourage people to be educated. And here at the HEA, we have pathways to employment where people can go and do a benefit estimator just to get a general feel for how your income will impact your Social Security benefits. But we also have some great training videos that have done by the folks at WISE who are certified benefit planners, and they did some videos that are part of the toolkit that we have for folks for supported employment. So I really encourage people to, take some time if you're working with some folks and you want to know a little bit of information. It's a great way to kind of learn that as well. Don and I actually had a training for folks to be certified benefit planners over the summer, and we had like over 30 people attend. So definitely we'll be seeing some more certified benefit planners across the state of Washington at different facilities, and part of a new program that Kimberly Castle is launching, the HEN Glide Path program. One of their pillars is to have certified benefit planners, and I think those folks start their training maybe this month. So the HEA has been doing a great job of getting some traction and getting that education out into the communities to work with more people, because I've worked with people in situations where they want to maintain their benefits. That's their client choice. Maybe we have to reduce their work hours to maximize work incentives through the different programs. And then I've also worked on people who don't want to be reliant, and they can use a process, a program, Healthcare for Disabilities, Apple Healthcare Workers with Disabilities. Dawn can correct me on the title because she's been working with those folks more so, but it's a program where you can go to work and you can buy into your Medicaid, 7% of your gross income. So you just pay your monthly insurance, health insurance, and you get Medicaid. And I've worked with people on SSDI on this, that they've been able to maintain their jobs for 20 years. It's really an incredible program to maintain that conduit and, basically maintain the healthcare for the behavioral health system and the psychotropic medications they were on, that they could be functioning in the community and maintain that lifeline. Because a lot of people, that's what they say, I need my Medicaid. And some states have used Medicaid waivers in this capacity to really help people for the long term. Sorry, that was a little bit longer than I usually do, but I'm pretty passionate about it because I know the bad and I know the good. So moving on to rapid job search. That Dawn has a catchy phrase that I like to adapt. It says rapid job search, not rapid job get. And I really like that because part of this principle brings into that principle about individual preferences or preferred, that I might come in and say, I want like to be work in an aircraft facility or work with NASA. And I had a person that really had that kind of goal in life, but where he was at in life, he wouldn't make any of the certifications and didn't have the degrees and didn't have the advanced training for that. So I was able to get him a job at the Space Museum, Museum of Flight in Seattle as a custodian. So it was kind of a balance. It was kind of his choice to kind of do the custodial work, but also he was in an environment that was really stimulating for him to do that. So it's taken those personal preferences and start that engagement to go out in the community to talk to employers about the goal. Sometimes this is research that we might go out and find out, well, the person doesn't have the criteria. Maybe there's some justice involved issues that are a barrier to working in a different environment. So sometimes it's that process of building trust with a person to say, I'm going to go out and talk to employers, or maybe I'm going to do some research to bring things together to give that job seeker some information and see if they kind of, with that information, will they reassess what their job goals are or what their skills are. Maybe they'll choose education or a training certificate program to kind of continue that goal that you're working on. And we really encourage people to use a job search plan so that you can put things in writing. I always found it valuable, like, oh, remember, Darren, you were working on this? Oh yeah, I was. Because sometimes people can switch goals weekly. It can be really frustrating. And then having that roadmap to kind of be grounded is really helpful. So I've talked about some forms, we've talked about data, we've talked about research. This is all part of that systematic job development process. That there's a process that we do to go out in the community. And particularly, this is what I really like about IPS, that they have these principles and it's a roadmap. And they have all these benchmarks, waypoints where you can go download these forms for free and use them and put them into your own process, into your policy and procedure manuals, and use them as working tools to really help people obtain employment. And we talked about the individual choice, we talked about rapid job search, but there's also going out in the community every week to engage. For high fidelity, that's 6, for your caseload, but it starts building that habit. And definitely Darren is a creature of habit. And I've got feedback from my staff that they really didn't like me going out in the community with them, looking over their shoulder to see what they're doing. But it made that stronger bond, me as a supervisor, to learn about what my staff are doing and if they're doing the kind of, job development that matches the person-centered goals. So it was an opportunity to do that. But there's these different elements that we really look at for forms, for job search, for job support or job retention. And these really, align well with foundational community supports, pre-employment and post-employment that we'll talk about a little bit later. Time and limited support, definitely, the IPS Learning Center developed this model pre-2008. So a lot of research went involved to create all these different principles. And here in Washington, we realized with foundational community supports, that we want to focus on long-term supports, time and limited supports. And when we look at that here, we understand that with WellPoint, the period of oh my goodness, authorization.
Eligibility. Oh, I'm going to do it. Jeez.
Tongue-tied, and now you got it. Sorry, Don. Authorizations only last 6 months, so we work around that. That it is that person's choice to be able to have these extended services, and we realize that with WellPoint, there's a period that ends, and there's some reauthorization. It only makes sense if the person's really engaged in working with the program to do that. So my apologies for winding down with tongue-tied words. But I'll just pause there before I hand it over to you, Don, if you had anything else to add.
I was just going to ask Nicole, how are we doing time-wise? Do we need to kind of wrap it up?
It's about 10, so we're doing good. I don't know how many slides, we got half the slides left, so I'm not sure how quick the other slides are. I think we're doing fine.
Okay.
I did want to touch base on, it's great to know where to look for stuff if there's a toolkit available. I know myself working in direct services, doing client advocacy, we do have care coordinators on this call. We have community health workers. We work with folks that are either applying for, these types of benefits or have them and don't understand. I mean, it's just easier when we equip ourselves with education. That's why I was so passionate about bringing this information to our region, because there are so many benefits and there's so many layers to it. And when we're working with clients, we want to be able to advise them and support them and encourage them. And I have had that experience where folks do not want to apply for work, or, they are afraid of changing their income. There's so many what ifs, and, don't want to move or touch anything because the fear of losing some things. I mean, some stuff is better than nothing, and we don't want people to end up with nothing. So I think if we have to continuously educate ourselves, and like you said, it's hard to keep up even when you're certified and trained on what is available. I know in a smaller, rural community, it's nice to be able to phone a friend that someone might be able to navigate through these types of things. Because even as a client advocate, case manager, you're trying to support people, let them know there are other options, not just in this limited box and limiting themselves, but sometimes they don't want to always take your word for it. So
absolutely.
It's nice to have a navigation source.
You bet. You mentioned the phone a friend. Darren and I love to receive consultation calls. If you have questions after
there you go, everybody, write their number down.
Yeah, I already put my email in the chat box, but if you need it again, and Darren's is the same kind of pattern, it's darren.paskey@hca.wa.gov and Don Miller at hca.wa.gov. So reach out to us if you have questions. We're happy to answer them. That's a piece of what we do and a piece of what we enjoy. I realized when I talked about zero exclusion, Darren, I forgot to tell the welder story, and I promised it earlier. And you have to hear this one. Gal on my caseload a number of years ago who was actively using meth. The first couple of times she came in to see me, she sort of hovered over her chair and then darted down the hall. And I chased her. I did to schedule another appointment to make sure that we got to continue yeah, you don't want to see me run. It's not pretty. But I did get her to schedule again. About the third meeting with her, we finally got into a little more of the, what do you want to do? And she said, I don't know. I've been a prostitute and a drug dealer. I've been mugged so many times from behind. I just know I want to do something legal. So we did a brief survey on the Career One Stop website, also on WorkSource, called an interest profiler. It's a thing where you go, you answer the questions. I would like to conduct a symphony orchestra. Yes, no, unsure. I would like to map the floor of the ocean. Yes, no, unsure. At the end of it, what came up was she wanted to be a welder, which I thought seemed really unlikely given her past work experience. But my face didn't say that, and I surely didn't say that. And I said, okay, let's do the research. Let's go for it. So the things that contributed to her success and our supports that you can provide in foundational community supports. I helped her apply for FAFSA, helped her to find that she was in default on school loans, and so we had to address that. Went with her to the financial aid office out at the community college. Went with her to talk to the head of the welding department. helped her to get into college. Her welding instructor, delightful man, made some accommodations without, just kind of without asking anybody. One being that he gave her the furthest away desk in the back of the room, so nobody was going to mill around behind her. And when she did welding in the welding carousel, it's a 3-sided thing with your back open. He let her leave 15 minutes early so that nobody would be milling around behind her either. Took her 2 years to get a 1-year certificate. At the end of that period of time, she got a job at a scrapyard using a cutting torch. Her family, who had disowned her, came back into her life. She became part of an NA group that became extended family of sorts. Her adult kids that had been taken from her by CPS years earlier started having contact with her again. And she went through the benefits planning thing so that she knew what was going to happen to her benefits. Everything that you would hope to happen in helping a person become successfully employed happened. It was mind-boggling to me. She had been no longer using meth for I don't know how long the last time that I heard her, but some of the statistics show that employment can help to decrease substance use, symptoms of mental illness. I mean, just a recidivism, a variety of things that happen when people become employed. So I love to tell that story just because you can see the depth and breadth of the supports, and just how successful a person can be, even when somebody like me looks at them and thinks, wow, I'm not so sure about that. We're all bad predictors as far as who's going to succeed at what. I was so thankful to be a bad predictor in that case. All right, so next slide, please, Darren.
Dawn or Darren, did you see in the chat, Dan had asked, how often do clients served by IPS supported employment? Do they look or engage with the community colleges to support additional training? And then he said you were just answering this question and then asked to elaborate a bit. Dan, did you have any further questions on that too?
Actually, I don't. I just want to know, even if you were to provide like a percentage of clients who are also engaged with community college system, I'm curious if there's any statistics on that matter.
Yeah, I don't know that we have those. I don't think that's one of the things that WellPoint collects per se, although they do ask agencies to report on a monthly basis about how many people are employed, how many are in educational opportunities. I'm not sure they've aggregated the data. I can tell you it's a smaller number than perhaps it could be. Part of it depends on the expertise of the employment specialist in talking with the person about long-term career goals. And would that long-term career goal be something that's going to require some additional education? So I think it varies. It varies based on provider. It varies based on, individuals in regards to whether you can help them work through the fear of going back to college. I know I've heard people say, I can't do it. I wasn't that good in school the first time around. And let them know that typically adult learners are very different than the young learners. They're there because they want to be. They have greater motivation to succeed. And so I think there's a huge number of factors in that, but I will say the number going to college is probably smaller than it could be. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does answer the question, but I'd also be interested in stories or narratives around the institutional or college's capacity to receive and provide a welcoming, environment for these individuals to thrive.
Mm-hmm. One of the classes that when I worked with folks that went to community college in the town where I was located, one of the classes that very often they were encouraged to take was college survival skills. That was geared towards the fact that at community colleges, most often the average age is a little higher than it is, in perhaps the four-year college. Is folks that have had lots of real life experiences working in a variety of things, have forgotten how to learn, potentially need some extra coaching in how to do that. And so I know the community college in Moses Lake had that class, and I heard from more than one person it was absolutely invaluable to get them back on the track of how do I learn, how do I take tests, how do I take notes, what are my resources, things along that line. I don't know whether it's a common practice for colleges to have that. It surely should be. But that was one of the things that helped to promote success.
It is a common practice for colleges to have that class.
Good.
And Nicole, if you don't mind me providing this kind of anecdote, I hope it's okay, but I'm working with our colleges around the state to develop baccalaureate degrees in behavioral health. And what I'm hearing is that the colleges, the students are almost more prepared than kind of the traditional college student to be successful in those programs because of their lived experience.
Yep.
And because of their maturity, because of we use a term incumbent workforce, they've kind of been through the grind. And so they're actually doing much better than the traditional college student in order to master the curriculum. And I was thrilled to hear that.
Absolutely. Well, and I'm going to say that the Foundation Community Supports programs or other programs that support them are something that's, a factor as well. Sometimes the people that go back to college have connected with a behavioral health agency or a DVR or, whoever it might be, and they have those supports to kind of help to succeed at what they're doing, as it should be.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you.
Great question. Thank you for asking that. And
Absolutely.
just to tie in a little bit what Don was saying, definitely, I think I saw a little bit more integration when there was more robust time with Division of Vocational Rehab was really helping people go to school. And I think there was a little bit more engagement with the student services on different campuses. But now I think with FCS, some of the providers we see that they don't always have a standalone employment staff, and it's a shared duty between housing and employment. And so I think it's really hard to have those intentional services for supportive employment. I would love to see more. That's kind of how I got into this field. I was doing some of those group services back a long time ago at South Seattle Community College to kind of get people integrated and just explore and kind of breaking down those barriers, stigma and fear of like, wow, I'm back on college campus. This is terrifying. That it was a very slow process. So it's great to hear that you're working on that. I don't know if there's anything that you have that you could send our way that we could share, with some of our teammates, because I think it's always great. I think education is still a pillar that's an option for folks to really, change their career trajectory. And like you said, the HCA is very passionate about people with lived experience, have a lot of certified peer programming and training for folks. And it would always be great to kind of have that other piece where you could connect to even higher education to move up, in the hierarchy of behavioral health, mental health, self-care, recovery.
I'd be happy to share information
Wonderful.
with you.
Awesome.
Thanks, Dan. Pardon me, goodness. So next slide, please, Darren. So, and once again, this time I really am not going to read to you. The 8 that you saw are kind of the overarching principles that most things fall under in IPS. Darren mentioned that there's 25 principles in general. The things that those 8 don't cover as much are these kinds of things. One of which Darren just mentioned that very often agencies to get started and sometimes ongoing have designated staff as housing and employment. I had the experience of doing that in the agency that I work for. So much of housing is emergent, and it is, that's fact. It's hard to set a boundary between half my time is going to be employment, half my time is going to be housing. And so what has happened pretty often when we go to do fidelity reviews is we see that both of the services don't get equal attention when somebody has to do both. And the IPS employment supported employment fidelity scale really encourages an employment specialist to be just an employment specialist. Any questions about the other ones? Disclosure is a big deal. Got to have the conversations with people on caseloads about, can I talk to an employer on your behalf? Because folks will sometimes say no. And if that was the only question I got, I'd say no too. If they said, on the other hand, I'd like to talk to them about, kind of your work history and that you've had some challenges, but you've managed to work past them, and here are all the strengths that you've got and all the things that you can do, and how you've accommodated those things that were less strong, and You know, I'd be far more likely to tell an employment staff, yeah, you can talk to them under those circumstances. The other thing I always did with people in my case is I'd let them know, I'm not going to tell them your diagnosis. There's no reason. If I say the word schizophrenia, does any of you get a warm and fuzzy feeling? The media has not been our friend. And so I don't do that to people. I wouldn't do that to people. And it's not the employer's business, the way that the person conducts themselves and how excuse me, that maybe the challenges they have could be employer's business. But if you can also say, here's how I've worked past those challenges, we all have challenges, then I think that's what the employer wants to hear is, you know, that what your weaknesses are and how to work past them. Let's see here. Any questions about the rest of those items? Or we can move on to the next slide.
Well, one thing I like about these principles, we really focus on employment. And as Don said, when you get too many roles and responsibility, it really takes away from that role of vocational generalist. And IPS gets, you know, there's going to be some, but not over 5% of your time per week is taken away to do other case management support duties. And this is hard for organizations because usually people wear many hats. Supervisors wear many hats, staff wear many hats. But this is one of those, you know, many of the principles that we reinforce because it does take that leadership support to develop a team that you're focused on employment.
Karen, we've got a little less than, well, we've got till about 1/2 past or, you know, 10:35, something like that. So about 20-ish minutes. So that the folks from Glide Path can give their information as well.
Sure. And we just talked about, you know, supported education. So definitely here are some online support. You know, it's kind of these tools that kind of get, you know, somebody thinking outside the box, not the only tool that you want to use. Because I really encourage people to actually, you know, spend some time looking at the curriculum, maybe at the higher education program, or maybe even a trade union, and go over the pros and cons and see where they're at, and maybe see if they need, you know, some help with math, you know, some structured program or something else, or maybe even get their GEDs so they can move on, you know, to higher education. So definitely everything we have in the slide deck has been shared. So definitely encourage folks to kind of explore some of the, you know, a little bit more on the topic on supported ed. Over to you, Don.
All righty. When the Foundational Community Supports Program was developed, the legislature actually said we needed to come up with a third-party administrator. It was AmeriGroup. They've changed their branding to now be WellPoint. So where it says WellPoint Contracted Services, that's who used to be AmeriGroup. WellPoint is our third-party administrator. They are the ones that contract with agencies. And this is the list of, if you look at their contract, the FCS pre-employment services. It is very much based on person's choice. So important that the person-centered planning happens. It is individualized. Interestingly enough, and I thought it was a real coup, our leaders, when they were negotiating with CMS related to services that could be billed versus not, so Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, one of the services that can be billed is an employment staff going out and talking to employers without the individual with them in order to do job development. Medicaid typically wants the person there, and rightfully so. My philosophy is the person needs to be involved in everything that the employment specialist is doing so that they're learning how to do a resume, a cover letter, how to talk to employers, you know, how to consider your transportation or your childcare or whatever it might be. We want to make ourselves obsolete. We want them to learn all those skills so that they can do them on their own the next time around, hopefully, or with less support if it goes that way. It does say their job carving or customized employment, and I, pardon me, mentioned that IPS doesn't see customized employment as competitive. It's not, but it's an important part, I think, of what we do. This list is very similar to the employment sustaining services, which Darren's going to talk about later. Does anybody have any comments or questions about this list? On to you, Darren.
Thanks, Don. So employment sustaining, and I also kind of think this as, you know, those retention services. What are we providing to really help the person maintain employment? Are we, you know, still connecting with the person who just got placed? Because a lot of things can happen the second day or within that first 30 days of, you know, somebody acclimating to a job. Or, you know, is there some accommodations that are needed? I've worked with a lot of people who are very hesitant to disclose, and I want to honor that process. But sometimes people get feedback from an employer. Maybe you're in a manufacturing position and your productivity time isn't at their standard. So we might have to request additional help or services to support that. And the way we could do that is through a request for a job accommodation, which might also take, you know, some medical documentation to support, or work with Department of VR. Maybe there's some assistive technology that we could enhance the work site to help somebody meet job expectations. One person, what he needed was inserts in the soles of his shoes so he could stand on cement and have a mat. So sometimes things are medically related that seem pretty easy, but can be a little bit complex, but it's not like changing a whole work site, but they could include some of those as well. And always looking at that job analysis piece, that we're getting feedback from the job seeker or who's working, and maybe we have a release so we can get information back from the supervisor to kind of see how things are going and if that's a good match, or be on site to really help the person and negotiate with the employer to provide that on site support. And as I said before, earned income changes things, so always be aware of that. And sometimes it's really hard. I've worked with people, it's just like, I'm not reporting my wages to Social Security. Well, that's unfortunate, but you know, you get these federal benefits, you're required to, and sooner or later they're going to learn. Well, no, they're not. Oh, okay. But I would continue to share the stories and share some of the consequences. And it's hard to honor people's choices sometimes when you know these are detrimental choices, and will have some impact down the road. You know, we talk about transportation. It is not a Medicaid covered service, you know, unless you're going to an interview with somebody in their car and you're going through some, you know, strategies on how to nail the interview, that you could create that Medicaid note for documentation. That kind of works. But going from employer to employer, office to employer, that's not covered by Medicaid. We always really want to kind of, you know, maintain that relationship with somebody so they're open to this kind of ongoing relationship, because things happen and I always wanted them to call me first. Sometimes they quit the job and then tell me, but hopefully they'll have that relationship with you that says, I'm having a hard time. I don't know if this is a good fit, and kind of maybe do some workarounds and maybe, you know, continue that employer as an asset for the program or for the individual. Maybe there's another job, take some barriers away or some challenges, and they could function higher in a different role at the company. Back over to you, Don.
Okay. So everything we do within social services, in my mind, should be done through a recovery lens. I think it was one of my first days in class in social work when I got my bachelor's, that the instructor talked about the fact that we're all capable of change, should we want to. And that's a guiding principle of what we do in foundational community support and employment. Folks are capable of changing. Folks are capable of recovering. Certainly, I consider myself in recovery related to anxiety disorder, because that's been something that is not debilitating in the way that it was before, thankfully. And so I think that's a strong principle that we all end up trying to keep in mind, is that recovery lens, that a person can change and grow, and we're helping them to have the tools in order to do that. Next slide, please, Darren. I think we've got about 4 of them that relate to recovery.
I think, you know, within the SAMHSA toolkits and the evidence-based practices, you know, there's always that pillar, you know, of recovery and those different elements that really focus on health and wellness, you know, that self-directed piece of the puzzle that can really, you know, maintain somebody as they're going through different stages of change. And, you know, to really develop what their full potential is. Definitely I've had people, you know, with some pretty significant jobs, but had to leave those because of substance abuse issues and then some justice involved issues. And it really took a while to get back. Maybe the job they were in wasn't their dream job because they maybe had that and want to get back there, but it may be a place for stabilization so you can kind of get some of these other things in order for stability and your health and your wellness, and maybe some sobriety, and working on new relationships so that you have that ability to excel and move into something else that's might be more demanding or match your previous lifestyle, depending on what they're looking at. So just reinforcing that this is a process. Sometimes you go forward, sometimes you go back, but you can still provide support to individuals to reach that goal over time. Back to you, Don.
Darren, I think rather than doing this slide, how about you advance a couple of them? So maybe to the not go forward. One more. Okay. So economic self-sufficiency. Is that something that always comes to mind when we're working with the people that we do on caseloads? I don't think it does, but I think it should. Being able to, and it relates right back to recovery, being able to contribute to your community, to contribute to your own success, to become a taxpayer so that the next person that needs services can receive them because you're paying in taxes that fund some of the programs. I think all of those are important things that we need to maintain as a focus when we're working with individuals. Have we helped them to become independent from the system, or have we created a dependence on the system? And I think it's a really important question that we should all ask ourselves in each case when we're working with people. Next slide, please, Darren. It looks like we've got about 4 minutes, so we're cruising along. 4 or 5, whatever.
And here's just a little bit of data that was done back in 2016 in King County. And there's some other articles that show the cost savings effect of IPS and some of the elements that Don just mentioned about people being financially, independent. And, some of the leverage that why we invest in community programs, because we do see that recidivism go down, jail costs go down, decrease in psychiatric hospital costs. So very time intensive and sometimes challenging processes that we really need to change how we look at things, and how we look at that expanded community web to provide ongoing and long-term support for individuals that we work with in the community with disabilities and life trauma and life challenges.
Absolutely. We did put in, I know Darren did a good job. I'm sorry, got a tickle. Darren did a good job of talking about the Pathways to Employment webpage, which is the one that has the benefits estimator, and it has the 4 2-hour trainings done by WISE on benefits planning. Pathways to Housing webpage has a wonderful budgeting tool, among other things. We didn't mention, and probably wouldn't, the Washington State ABLE savings plans. All of these are functional links, and that's something that can be used by individuals or their family members to help to create a savings account in excess of what normally they'd be able to do. For folks that have disabilities and maybe their parents are getting older and they're worried about what they're going to do about money in the future, this is one of those kinds of things can address that. Darren mentioned the healthcare for workers with disabilities, also known as Apple Health for workers with disabilities in the state of Washington. I think the others are pretty self-explanatory. And then the bottom one is actually the link to the website for individual placement and support. It has trainings available. It has a library with documents and studies and statistics and a variety of things. It's an incredibly helpful site. And so I would recommend, when you have time and if you're interested, taking a look at any of these sites. Also, keep in mind that you can reach out to Darren and I if you have questions, if you want some additional training of some sort for an agency for with whom you work or whatever it might be, because we do those kinds of things. Darren, do you have more to add to this one?
Yeah, just encourage people to, check out the HCA YouTube channel. This one takes you to the FCS. We do a lot of trainings that are recorded, particularly the Golden Thread, which is a 6-part series that really talk about SMART goals and Medicaid documentation. So if you have some new staff and need some onboarding tools, this is a great place to go and peek at that and maybe explore. There might be some other things that really align to some of the needs of the program and bringing people on staff, or maybe they need a refresher as well.
Absolutely. Ta-da!
Thank you all for
Now is the time for the song and the dance. Cue up the piano on.
Karen's
La,
happy
la, la, la,
dance.
That's so. I expect that next time, guys.
Okay, all right, we promise. Thank
You're
you so much for letting us be here and you know, for allowing us to talk about something for which we have a lot of passion.
Absolutely, and I think that's what we all need to hear in our world is that, you know, there is very passionate people doing the work, applying this, making changes and making things work and more accessible for everyone. So thank you. This is a great time. We have a few minutes. Annette Rodriguez from Yakima Neighborhood Health Services is also joining us to talk about Glide Path, but I wanted to leave a few minutes for Dawn and Darren to bombard them with questions.
A lightning
and
round.
Yeah. You
Bring
know,
it on.
my question, or I'll open the floor to at least start with, is that, you know, you're speaking as, you know, these benefits that we can provide to clients and how you should walk through it with them and how you can help them. So in accessing these benefits, are we talking to some of these folks that are doing these direct services on how do we get started on accessing being a provider and being the, you know, supported employment person in our community? Do they contact you directly, or what would be the next steps for someone who's like, I want that in my house?
Okay, very, very good. So if somebody wants to be a provider, WellPoint has a series of forms to fill out and things along that line, numbers that you have to get, you know, as a business to begin with in order to be able to apply to be a foundational community supported employment or supportive housing provider. Our colleague in the DBHR team, Rayanne Orbaum, is just a master in regards to kind of helping to guide agencies through how to apply to become an FCS provider. And so if anyone's interested, we can certainly link you with Rayanne. She does a great job of that. If an individual wants to receive services, it's intended to be a no wrong door kind of philosophy. A person can refer themselves. What I pretty often recommend is there is an FCS provider map that exists that if you get into the map, it will show what providers are in what area, which services they provide, and give contact information. I kind of encourage individuals to take a look at that map and to consider what agencies are in their area and go to that agency for assistance to apply for services. I think it ends up being a little easier for them. And so that's something that I typically recommend. But a person can just call WellPoint, say they're interested in services, and get some assistance to do that as well. Darren, anything I missed out on saying?
Spot on. And that process can even take place if somebody is in a hospital or incarceration, you know, to get that process going so that they have that bridge support upon discharge.
Right, as they come out. Yeah, definitely. Well, thanks, Nicole, for putting those links in.
So as we talk about folks coming out of incarceration, I know there's a big, you know, a wave coming on getting into reentry programs and you know, instilling programs in justice systems. Is the healthcare authority, as far as FCS, going to be heavily involved in that and providing more supports before? Okay.
They really have been, you know, with the Blue Blood settlement and infusion of funds. There's a new program for some pre-education that's kind of focused on that population and the SUD population. And I think with the new waiver, because we just was granted another 5-year mission with CMS to provide additional services, and within that is some elements on how to provide more services for those people being discharged from the justice system. So I don't have any details, but it's still being worked out. And we're also, like I said, co-planting, you know, putting staff within the facilities to help with some of that navigation. I think they're looking at in the state hospitals, Eastern and Western State Hospital to kind of work with folks so that they can have some of those FCS connections upon discharge.
And I will say there are current FCS providers that have a focus of reentry and helping people as they reenter the community. I know not to choose one over another, just because the one that came to mind is Revive Reentry in Spokane. Does a marvelous job of connecting with folks as they're coming out of incarceration in order to help them with housing and employment, and a variety of other things. I know they do substance use disorder services as well, and mental health services, treatment as well. So, and they are just an example of an agency that's already doing that kind of thing.
Yes. Does anybody have any questions for Darren and Dawn while we have their full attention and have them on the stage? We're all experts now. We're ready to go.
Yay!
Open our door. Yeah.
Well, that's another happy dance time. Everybody's an expert.
My goal is by the end of this series that we have an increased amount of providers with FCS across our region. I would love to see that, so we do have that true no wrong door approach.
Definitely.
And I encourage you. They've been such a great group of folks to work with and responsive and answering our questions and bringing this to our region. So I encourage you all to reach out directly and set something up.
Absolutely. Well, and I didn't mention it and should have, when an agency is interested in becoming an FCS agency, WellPoint does a variety of trainings related to kind of the administrative piece of things. Darren and I and our colleagues, Anessa and Jackie, do training related to the evidence-based practices and practicalities of providing the services, because we've been direct service providers for a number of years, in either supported employment or supportive housing. And so that training is free and available, and individualized as needed. We go to agencies to do individualized trainings on kind of a regular basis. So there's lots of coaching and mentoring that can happen with a brand new agency.
And we also have a new staff. Maureen Maples is the transitional assistant program manager to have additional funds starting, I think, July 1st, 2024. That really kind of helps bridge people, to get housing and cover some of those needs. And we're always available to come out and, do another, training. Definitely, virtually invite us, and we're doing more face-to-face things that we can, look at different levels of engagement to review the information, because I think it's good to have the information once, but I'm somebody who needs repetition sometimes for it to sink in.
I think we all do. So yeah, Maureen said, thanks for the intro. Maureen, if you want to put your email in the chat, then folks can reach out to you directly too. And Kyle asked, can we give a brief explanation of relationship between HCA, FCS, and IPS? So Healthcare Authority contracts with WellPoint related to FCS. FCS is Foundational Community Supports, which is a program that is hosted by the Healthcare Authority. It's the Supported Employment and Supportive Housing. It's part of the 1115 Medicaid Transformation Project. It's actually initiative number 3, and there's 5 initiatives now under the 1115 Medicaid Transformation Project. And if you look on our website, the Healthcare Authority website, you can find that. And then IPS is the evidence-based practice of supported employment. When we went into, proposing to do foundational community supports, the legislature said we needed to use evidence-based or promising practices because they wanted the biggest bang for their buck. They wanted the best outcomes. And so individual placement and support is that evidence-based practice. For housing, it's called permanent supportive housing is the evidence-based practice. Excuse me. They both show up on the SAMHSA website and have toolkits there. I think, Nicole, you asked about a toolkit. They both exist on the SAMHSA website.
The more we know, the better.
Indeed.
Exactly.
Well, I believe you all have their contact information. If you guys have any questions, folks in the audience, and you have a hard time getting a hold of Dawn or Darren or didn't write down their contact, just reach out to us at Greater Health Now. We can get you hooked up with them, but feel free to reach out to them directly and bombard their emails and their phones. We are so, thank you you guys both so much.
Thank you.
We-
This was a pleasure.
You're fantastic. Thank you so much. We have our folks from Yakima Neighborhood Health Services. They were very fortunate. We're fortunate that they're with us today to talk about their Glide Path program. I've got Annette Rodriguez. She's the Homeless Services Officer at YNHS, and I will give her the floor so she can present some of what they got going on.
Sure. Thank you so much. Good morning. I'm Annette Rodriguez from Yakima Neighborhood Health Services. Like Nicole said, I'm the Homeless Services Officer for Neighborhood Health, and I'm actually doing a presentation in place of my coworker, Mary Diaz. It's a funny thing. I came back from vacation and she left for vacation. So I'm going to do my best. I will leave the slide at the very end up for a few minutes or as long as I can so that you all can get her contact information. If you all want these shared, I'm sure we can do that as well, Nicole. So I just wanted to, and Dawn, thank you. Dawn is, they are very true to their word. They were our trainers. So it was really nice to be able to follow up after her. I never thought I'd be having these kind of conversations. It's new work, and to be able to learn from, Dawn and her coworkers and the healthcare authority has just made a huge difference in our life here with our population. So a little bit about the Glide Path program. It's just, I think I heard you say that there were care coordinators on the call. I don't know if they're housing providers on the call, or already employment specialists on the call. But this Glide Path program that we have is it's to support individuals who are already enrolled in community, foundational community support. So they do have to be enrolled in the FCS program. The supported employment is for the Glide Path is to help those individuals that are transitioning maybe from from HEN, from the Housing and Essential Needs Program, to the HEN or to the Social Security Disability Benefits. Some of those individuals may also lose the HEN and be in a kind of a gap phase where there's also bridge funding to be able to help those individuals. So the good thing is that we are a provider that also does the bridge funding. The funding for the Glide Path will serve the Greater Columbia, and that's why we're sharing this information across, because one of the expected roles that we'll be playing to the region is that we have benefit specialists. We have 2 certified benefit specialists now, and we also have one that is in the process of being certified. So I'd like to go ahead from here and just share the slides. Hopefully I'll be able to do that and then just go through them with y'all. I hope that I'm able to share. I wanted to start off with the conversation of the benefits planner and the role that the benefit planner plays with the Glide Path folks. And I am not, can you see that?
Does she have to be a co-host to be able to share her screen?
I did make her a co-host, so she yeah, you have co-host permissions, but
Okay, sorry about that. Let me see if why it's not sharing. Let me try again. Maybe I tried too soon.
we have to be patient with our computers. I found that I was not patient with my computer yesterday and it backfired on me. Right, Kaylee?
Please upload your presentation to share. I'm not sure what's.
Do you want to send it to me via email real quick? I made you the host as well. Or you can send it over to me real quick via that
Let me
same
see.
email.
Yeah, I could do that. Let's do that better.
There's always a workaround, isn't there?
And let's see, Nicole. I'm so sorry,
Oh, don't be sorry. This gives us a great time. We can do some Zen moments. We can stretch. We can think about all the questions we're gonna dump on Dawn and Darren, and people are already sending them emails to set up one-on-one appointments.
Nicole, I don't think I have your email. I thought I had it, but I think that is my first problem.
All right, here, I'm replying to yours.
Put-
There you go.
Let's see.
Just by a show of hands, while I'm waiting for Annette to send that to me. By show of hands on your raise the hand feature or on the actual screen, do we have other FCS providers in our region that are on this call today that are good folks to reach out to as a peer? Oh. Not yet. Next time we will be. Oh, awesome, Kyle. And Kyle, are you located in the Tri-Cities or where's Columbia? Okay.
Okay, Nicole, hopefully.
Did you send that over?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, now it's relying on me. Whew.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to see what's different. Is it?
And that's all right. You can just wing it until I get it.
I can actually just talk. The first slide that you'll see is just the description of a benefit planner. The benefit planner informs those that are on Social Security and SSI or SSDI benefits, so that it's possible for them to return to work and keep their benefits through planning and organization. This has really been a benefit to our agency, and to be able to spread it out to the community or to the region, I think is a very unique opportunity. So we're pretty excited about being able to do that. The definition of the work incentive plan, because there's also a slide that we want to share was this, and I can read it real quick. It's a set benefit and work incentive counseling strategy, services and supplements that seek to promote work preparation, attachment and advancement, focusing on enhancement of self-sufficiency and independence of individuals with disability who receive disability benefits and other public entitlements through informed choice, which may result in decreased reliance on public benefit programs and increased financial well-being. Yeah, that's the one. So we can go to the next slide already. Thank you so much. What does a benefit planner do? The benefit planner is basically collecting information and data and works to analyze different situations and scenarios that benefit the individual. They work as a problem solver, and they also do lots of advocacy, but most importantly, they do the benefits counseling, the long-term benefits assistance, and follow up with services as needed with the individual. I like that I heard, I'm sorry, I had my note here, that there was a discussion. I think Darren said that, you know, overpayment is a real big concern, and having a benefit specialist involved is someone who can actually go through and help them report to Social Security disability or their benefits, so that they can understand what they may lose, but what they may gain in terms of the benefits. Next slide, please. So the principles in benefit planning is maintaining professional competence, protecting consumer confidentiality, serving the consumer consumer's interest and respecting consumer choice, avoiding conflicts of interest, and maintaining personal integrity. Next slide, please. Definition of disability. The inability to engage in any substantial gainful employment. Somebody who's dealing with a physical or mental impairment that can result in death or has lasted or can be expected to last a continuous period of not less than 12 months. Next slide, please. Sometimes even our participants aren't sure if they're on Social Security, if they're on SSI or SSDI. So the benefits planners are really specialized in being able to identify those or find out and help advocate and make those phone calls to Social Security to find out exactly what their benefits are. So SSI, Supplement Security Income, provides income to individuals who are age blind and disabled, and it provides a minimum income level. Next slide, please. Title II disability programs, SSDI. There are 3 types. Disability insurance benefits. You'll see oftentimes even on a benefit statement letter, at the, I think it's the right-hand corner at the top, might have these acronyms, DIB, so disability insurance benefit, childhood disability benefits, or widow benefits. Beneficiaries are treated the same when it comes to returning to work, and work incentives are applied independently to each benefit received. Next slide. So the work incentives. So part of the benefit specialist, and I probably should have said the Glide Path program is supporting the benefit specialist. So the benefit specialist that meets with those individuals or has phone conversations, or even we could do Zoom calls with those individuals to discuss what their work incentives are. So one of the things that I learned this year was the trial work period. I had no idea about a trial work period, and I thought that was really interesting. And we'll go into more detail, but these are the work incentives: the trial work period, the extended period of eligibility, the extended Medicare, expedited reinstatement, income averaging on successful work attempt, impairment related expense, and subsidy and special conditions. Next slide, please. So the trial work period, period means that it's a 9-month work period with a 60-month rolling period. Beneficiary can earn more than $1,500, and benefits are paid during their trial work period regardless of the earnings. So this is where it's really important that if we do have an individual that's working and on benefits, that we let Social Security know, because if they're earning more than what they're allowed to earn, there could be potential for payback. Next slide, please. The countable income, they don't count sick and vacation hours, bonus or incentive pay, earnings in a cafeteria flex spending plan, for example. Next slide, please. And examples of some of the possible deductions. All deductions must be approved by Social Security Administration, of course, but transportation could be something: medical equipment, work-related equipment, service animals, residential modifications, and routine drugs. Those are deductions that can actually be taken away or counted as a cost or a cost incurred that would be deducted from their allowable work income. So it actually allows them to earn a higher income and then take in those deductions for consideration. They'll actually count those. Next slide, please. Impairment-related work expenses are a deduction from gross earning. This will reduce the countable income. The expense for an item or service cannot work without this item. For example, something that they need to be able to perform their work duties. Is necessary due to physical or mental impairment, must be an out-of-pocket expense, must be paid during a month of activity, and must be approved again by Social Security Administration. So avoiding an overpayment. So super important that everybody that is receiving benefits and has started a new job report their monthly earnings. It is required that they report no later than the 10th of each month. Request for receipts from Social Security Administration. They may request proof of the allowable deductions. So we encourage them always to keep copies, or even as their case manager for or benefit specialist. Those might be things that we also help them keep organized. Organized correspondence received from Social Security Administration. We definitely don't want them to miss out on a statement or a letter. You can go to the next slide. This is Rose. I want to introduce Rose, and I wanted to just let you know that the title of each slide are her personal comments. This is Rose, who is participating in the Glide Path program and the Foundational Community Supportive Employment. Rose has been on SSI since 2017. She has wanted to return to work for a very long time, and because of her Social Security was not enough for her. But Rose was one of those individuals who thought, if I work, I'm going to lose my benefits. If I work, it takes so long to get back on Social Security. I mean, those were things that she was also saying. So she started working with an employment specialist who helped her find a job. And things just started changing for her. So next slide, please. Returning to work has built my self-esteem. Rose has taken on lots of responsibilities in her current employment role. In the time Rose has worked, she's mentioned the difference in herself. These are her words. She feels more confident. She's lost weight. She feels more energized. She looks forward to what the day will bring. She feels happier. And most importantly, she has increased her income. I believe I am a success and there's nothing I can't do. This has motivated her. It has empowered her. She feels like she can tell other people that this is something that they should, find out if they're eligible for. So Rose meets with her benefit planner once a month to review and report the income. They work a calculation worksheet, which will help her benefits or show her an example of how her benefits will be reduced for the month. And she's learning how to organize and keep track of her Social Security paperwork. The second bullet arrow there, the calculation worksheet that will show her benefits will be reduced. This is a good example. Rose, after the benefit specialist did the paperwork with her, she said, Rose, you're going to lose about $170. But because of your current employment, you increased your earned income to, I think it was $370. So she said, I'm still earning more income. And some of those comments that she said about feeling better and then just having purpose and working has just made her feel so much better. This is how you can refer to us. And like I said, I'm standing in for Mary, who is the expert at this moment with this, but she talks about the BPQY, which stands for Benefit Planning Query. So there's a specific form that's completed. We want to connect with you all out there on this Zoom call. So getting the contact information I think is important. So y'all can come back and let us know that you're interested in receiving our assistance as benefit planners, and that also we're able to do that by completing a release of information and having you all help us complete the BBQ or the BPQY. The contact information and how to fax it directly to us. The benefit planning query, it's a type of benefit receiving. This is what's in the form. The type of benefit receiving, the date of disability onset, date of entitlement, income, gross and net, past and present overpayments, medical re-exam cycle, health insurance, plan incentives, Social Security, disability, income, work activity sheets, and their record of earnings. Once that form is completed, we actually sent it directly to Social Security office, and they have about 30 days to respond back to us. The good thing about having a benefit planner is that they're already making those connections and having those strong relations or developing those relationships with staff at Social Security, so they can identify that this is, this is a glide path individual who is completing a BQY with the benefit specialist, and the communication happens a lot quicker. Next slide. So we've been developing a way for y'all to be able to send and refer folks to us. So we think the best way to do this, of course, is we have to have some type of face-to-face appointment. So we will contact the client to schedule an appointment after the BBQY, I'm sure I'm going to mess that up, BPQY is received. The appropriate time for an intake will be allowed for part of our schedule. And we will also, in the process, we'll be able to do and schedule auto appointments, which is the kind of the FaceTime healthcare. It's basically a virtual digital visit with the patient or participant with the benefits planner or specialist that's actually located in the Yakima office. But because we're allowed, or because our contract is allowing us to serve parts of the region, this feels like the most convenient way to be able to serve the individual, so they wouldn't have to come all the way to Yakima. The client will have a better understanding of their benefits and be able to decide if returning to work is right for them. So this is how you cannot reach me, but you can reach Mary Diaz. She is our Emergency Services and Employment Supervisor. Her direct line number is on here, her desk, her fax number, her email. We really want to connect with you all. So if you're interested, like I said, we can send out this presentation and Nicole can distribute it to those who are maybe FCS providers, care coordinators, or also depending on, you know, where you're working, but this is really for individuals who are kind of, you know, in that gap period with the HEN program, or those that are losing the HEN program because they are no longer eligible because of their disability, or they're no longer eligible because they're being moved to Social Security benefits. And if you have questions, I can write them down. I'll try to answer them. I have information in front of me that might be able to even help answer the questions. The one thing that I did leave out was that this program will also help reduce barriers for employment. So it would help with if somebody has a transportation issue, maybe they need employment clothing or interviewing clothing, and things like that. So there are things that can help reduce the barriers for their employment. If anything, we would just call and ask or send an email to our technical support folks and ask if that's something that we could help with. Definitely, this is a really great project and program. So we're excited to share that with y'all. Thank you.
This is awesome. Thank you, Annette, for jumping on last minute.
No, thank you for having me.
We'll give
I
Mary
felt
a
like
hard
it
time
was-
for disappearing on you and going on vacation. How dare she? I do want to touch on, I know some people are up and off because we're at the top of the hour, but just a
Yeah.
huge difference that person-to-person contact makes for folks looking just to help navigate benefits, services, just anything. It's the human contact makes such a huge difference. And for her to be willing to share her testimony makes just a world of difference for other people that are looking for support and help. You know, just that pure encouragement and advocacy goes such a long way. Appreciate all that you're doing. Does anybody have questions for Annette? Or do we just want to go bombard her office too and start lining up the door?
Yeah, it's a lot of information. So if, you know, folks do want a little bit more of a one-on-one, or, you know, you reach out to Mary, I'm sure that she can offer that as well.
Her email box and voicemail filled up before she gets back. Well, I appreciate you all so very much. I encourage you all to reach out to the folks that presented today to learn more about it and take advantage of these wonderful benefits and opportunities for folks in your community, and in your organizations and your partners. It's great when we can all learn from each other. It's 11:02. I appreciate each and every one of you and the work that you're doing. If you have any questions, reach out to us. We will try and get this information out if you gave us your contact info. With that said, have a
Yes.
fantastic day.
Thank you so much.
We're halfway through the week.
Yes.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you. Thank you so much.